Sadie Ruth Prescott dropped to her knees in the dirt where her herb garden used to be, every plant torn out by the roots. Feverfew, yarrow, comfrey. 2 years of careful growing destroyed in a single night while she slept, and nailed to her fence post a note written in red paint. Witch. Leave or burn. She did not cry. She had stopped crying 18 months ago, the day they buried her husband in a grave too shallow for a man who deserved better. But her hands shook as she gathered the crushed leaves into her apron, because even ruined medicine was better than none at all. If you want to see how one woman fights back against an entire town, subscribe to Native American Tales and follow Sadie's story until the very end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The summer of 1878 arrived in Ridgeback, Texas like a punishment nobody asked for. Heat pressed down on the town from sunrise, and by noon, even the horses standing outside the general store had stopped flicking their tails because the effort cost more than the flies were worth. Dust coated everything: wagon wheels, window glass, the hems of women's dresses dragging along the wooden sidewalks. Sadie Ruth Prescott walked through that dust every Tuesday morning to sell what she could at the back corner of the market square, where respectable merchants did not have to stand too close. Today, her table held 6 small jars of salve, a bundle of dried chamomile, and 3 bottles of fever tonic wrapped in cloth to keep the sun from spoiling them. No one had stopped at her table in 2 hours. She watched Mrs. Alma Decker cross the square with her daughter, both of them angling their path wide around Sadie's corner, the way folks angled around mud puddles or horse droppings. The daughter glanced once toward the table, curious, but Mrs. Decker pulled her arm and whispered something that made the girl's face tighten. Sadie kept her hand still on the table. She had learned that stillness drew less attention than movement. "Morning, Mrs. Prescott." She looked up. Emmy Cook stood at the edge of her table, a basket over one arm, and a look on her face that said she had walked over here on purpose, knowing full well who was watching. "Morning, Emmy. You got any of that salve left, the one you made last month for my boy's rash?" "I do." Sadie reached for one of the small jars. "Same recipe: calendula and beeswax." Emmy took the jar and pressed 2 coins into Sadie's palm before she could name a price. "Keep the change. Lord knows you earned it." "Emmy, this is too much." "It ain't." Emmy lowered her voice. "I heard what happened to your garden. Whole town's talking about it like it's some kind of justice." Sadie's jaw tightened. "It's just plants." "It's your livelihood is what it is. And we both know who's behind it, even if nobody wants to say his name out loud." Sadie did not answer, but her eyes moved briefly toward the general store at the far end of the square, where Silas Garrett stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, watching the market like a man surveying his own kingdom. Emmy noticed the glance. "Be careful, Sadie. He's got half this town in his pocket, and the other half too scared to cross him." "I know." "Do you?" Emmy's voice dropped even lower. "He told Pastor Whitmore last Sunday that the Lord's work sometimes means clearing out the unclean." The pastor didn't argue. Sadie's hands pressed flat against the table, steadying herself. "What do you want me to do? Emmy, pack up and leave. Let him take my land, because he decided it was more useful to him than to me." "I want you to survive," Emmy said. "Whatever that takes." She walked away before Sadie could respond, disappearing into the crowd of market-goers who had very deliberately not seen their conversation. Sadie stood alone at her table for another hour. She sold nothing else. When the sun reached its highest point and the heat became unbearable, even for the merchants with shade covers, she packed her jars back into her basket and began the long walk home. The road out of town passed directly in front of Garrett's general store. She could have taken the back route longer, dusty or no shade at all, but something stubborn in her refused to add 20 minutes to her walk, just to avoid a man who had no right to make her feel small in her own town. So she walked straight past his store-eyes forward basket, steady on her arm. Mrs. Prescott. His voice stopped her like a hand on her shoulder. Silas Garrett stepped down from his porch, his boots loud on the wooden steps. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. The kind of man who had learned to use pleasantness like a weapon. "Hot day for selling medicine nobody wants," he said. Sadie turned to face him. "I sold what I needed to sell." "Did you now?" He glanced at her basket still full. "Seems like the good folks of Ridgeback have made their feelings clear. Can't say I blame them. Hard to trust remedies that come from a woman who talks to plants instead of praying to God." "I pray, Mr. Garrett, just not loud enough for you to hear." His smile flickered. "You've got a sharp tongue, Mrs. Prescott. Your husband ever teach you that wasn't becoming in a woman? My husband taught me plenty of things, none of which concern you." She turned to walk away. "That land of yours," Silas called after her. 20 acres, ain't it? Good soil if someone knew what to do with it. Shame to see it wasted on weeds and superstition." Sadie stopped. Her back was still to him, but her voice carried clear in the noon heat. "It's not wasted, and it's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mrs. Prescott. Just depends on the price." He paused. "Or the pressure." She walked away without answering because anything she said would only give him more ammunition. But her hands were shaking again by the time she reached the edge of town, and this time it was not grief, it was anger. Jonas Cole Hardin arrived in Ridgeback 3 days later, riding a gray mare that looked as tired as he felt. 8 years of hunting men for money had taught him to read a town before he even dismounted. He could tell from the way people walked, the way they grouped together, the way their eyes moved when a stranger passed through. Ridgeback was scared of something. Not bandits. A bandit town moved differently, all sharp glances and hands near holsters. This was something quieter, something inside the town itself. He dismounted outside the only saloon and tied his mare to the rail. His clothes were plain, no badge, no obvious weapons except the knife at his belt. The rifle stayed in its scabbard on the saddle. He did not want anyone knowing what he had been before he decided to stop being it. The saloon was half empty at midday. A few ranch hands nursing beers at a corner table. A woman wiping down the bar who looked up when he walked in and gave him the once-over that bartenders everywhere gave strangers. "Whiskey," he said. "And information if you've got it." "Whiskey I can do." She poured a shot and slid it across the wood. "Information depends on what you're asking." "I'm looking for a place to settle. Heard there might be land available outside town?" The woman Emmy her apron said studied his face for a moment. "There's land. Whether it's available is another question." Meaning the only acreage not already claimed belongs to a widow on the North Road, and she ain't selling. Not that half the town hasn't tried to convince her otherwise. Jonas took a slow sip of his whiskey. "Someone want her gone." Emmy glanced toward the door, then back at him. "You didn't hear this from me, but Silas Garrett's been after her land for 2 years now. Says he needs it for a warehouse expansion. Really, I think he just can't stand a woman telling him no. This widow, she got a name, Sadie Prescott. Husband died in a mining accident up near Copper Hill. She stayed, started growing herbs making medicine. Good medicine too, not that anyone around here will admit it." Emmy's voice dropped. "Garrett started a rumor she's a witch. Got the church involved. Now half the town's afraid to be seen talking to her." Jonas set down his glass. "And the other half? Too busy trying to stay on Garrett's good side to do anything about it." He thought about that for a moment. About towns he had seen before, where one man's money bought enough silence to make decent people forget they were decent. "This Sadie Prescott," he said. "She in trouble." Emmy looked at him. Really looked for the first time. "Mister, that woman's been in trouble since the day her husband died. Only difference is, now the trouble's got teeth." Sadie was in what remained of her garden when she heard the horse approaching. She straightened up one hand, pressing against her lower back where the stooping had made it ache, and watched the rider come up the north road. A man on a gray mare, riding slow like he had nowhere urgent to be, but was paying attention anyway. Not someone she recognized. She wiped her hands on her apron and waited. He stopped his horse at her fence line, but did not dismount. Just sat there for a moment, looking at the torn-up garden, the bare patches where plants used to grow, the single bucket she had been using to water the few survivors. "Ma'am," he said finally. "You Sadie Prescott?" "Who's asking?" "Name's Jonas Harden. I'm looking for work. Heard you might need some help out here." Sadie narrowed her eyes. "Who told you that?" "Woman at the saloon. Said you'd been having some trouble with your land." "Trouble?" She almost laughed. "That's a polite word for it." He dismounted then, moving with the kind of careful efficiency that came from years of practice. Not a young man anymore, mid-30s she guessed, with lines around his eyes that spoke of weather and harder things. But solid, strong. The kind of man who knew how to use his hands without being told. "I can fix fences," he said. "Rebuild what needs rebuilding. I ain't asking much, just a place to sleep and a fair wage." "Why here?" "Because here is where I stopped." He met her eyes directly, and she saw something in them she had not expected, a kind of weariness that went deeper than tired muscles. "And because it looked like you could use someone who ain't afraid of hard work." Sadie studied him for a long moment. In 2 years, no one from Ridgeback had offered to help her with anything. They either avoided her completely or came sniffing around with offers to buy her land at half its value. This man was different. She could not say how exactly, just that the way he stood, the way he looked at her ruined garden, without pity or judgment, it felt honest. "Mr. Harden," she said slowly, "you should know that working for me ain't exactly a popular position in this town. The man who runs the general store has decided I'm a problem that needs solving, and anyone who helps me becomes part of that problem." "I've been a problem before," Jonas said. "Didn't kill me." "It might here." "Then I'll die doing something useful instead of just drinking myself to death in a saloon somewhere." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "Point me to what needs fixing, Mrs. Prescott. I'll earn my keep." She looked at the ruined garden, at the fence posts that had been kicked loose last week, at the shed door that hung crooked because someone had tried to pry it open while she was in town. Then she looked back at the stranger who had ridden up her road and offered help without being asked. "There's a barn needs cleaning," she said finally, "and a roof section that leaks when it rains. If you can start there, we'll see about the rest." Jonas nodded once, took his mare's reins, and walked toward the barn without another word. Sadie watched him go, unsettled in a way she could not quite name. Not afraid, she had stopped being afraid of men a long time ago, but aware. The way prey was aware when something new entered its territory. She went back to her garden and her watering bucket, but she kept one eye on the barn door. Something told her that Jonas Harden had not ended up at her fence by accident. And something else, something quieter, harder to name, told her she was glad he had. That night, Silas Garrett sat in his office above the general store reading a letter by lamplight. The letter was from the county land office in Austin. It confirmed what he already knew. Sadie Prescott's claim to her 20 acres was legal and ironclad. Her husband had filed the paperwork correctly before he died, and there was no legal mechanism to remove her unless she sold voluntarily or forfeited the land through unpaid taxes. She had paid her taxes every year, on time, in cash. Silas set the letter down and poured himself a drink. He had been patient. For 2 years he had been patient. He had started rumors. He had encouraged the church to preach about ungodly women. He had made sure her supplies at the general store were always more expensive, always slightly worse quality. He had sent boys to kick her fence posts loose and tear up her garden in the night. None of it had worked. The woman simply would not break. A knock came at his door. "Come in." His foreman, a man named Raleigh, stepped inside. Got news, boss. That Prescott woman hired someone today. Man rode into town this afternoon, went straight to her place. Silas looked up. What kind of man? Quiet. Keeps to himself. Wears a knife, but no gun I could see. Staying in her barn, looks like. Got a name. Harden. Jonas Harden. Silas turned the name over in his mind. It sounded familiar, but he could not place it. Find out who he is, he said. Where he's from, what he did before he came here. And if he's trouble, Silas smiled that cold smile that never touched his eyes. Then we make sure he understands whose town this is. Same way we've been helping Mrs. Prescott understand. Raleigh nodded and left. Silas stood at his window looking out at the dark road that led north toward Sadie Prescott's land. Toward the woman who refused to sell. Toward the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to help her. Every problem has a solution, he murmured to himself. Just have to find the right pressure. He finished his drink and went to bed already planning his next move. In the barn, Jonas lay on a pile of clean straw and stared at the ceiling. He could hear the Texas night outside cicadas screaming in the heat, a coyote calling somewhere far off, the occasional stamp of his mare settling in her stall. He should not be here. He had sworn after what happened in Abilene that he would never involve himself in other people's troubles again, that he would find somewhere quiet, somewhere empty, somewhere he could not hurt anyone else by making the wrong choice at the wrong moment. And instead, on his first day in a new town, he had walked straight into the middle of a fight that was not his. Because he had seen Sadie Prescott's hands shaking while she watered her ruined garden. Because he had recognized the stubborn set of her shoulders the way she refused to cry even when crying would have been easier. Because she reminded him of someone he had failed to save a long time ago. Jonas closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would start fixing her fence, then her roof, then whatever else needed fixing until Silas Garrett decided to make a move. And when that happened, when the pressure finally came, Jonas would have to decide whether he was still the kind of man who stood between the wolves and the innocent, or whether that man had died in Abilene along with everyone else. Jonas woke before dawn to the sound of boots crunching on dry ground outside the barn. He was on his feet and half a second knife already in his hand, body pressed flat against the wall beside the door. Old instincts never died. They just waited for the right moment to remind a man what he used to be. 3 sets of footsteps, moving slow, trying to be quiet but failing because they were not professionals. Jonas eased the barn door open an inch and watched. 3 men faces hidden by bandanas heading toward the house with something in their hands. Glass bottles, cloth stuffed in the necks, fire starters. He did not think. He moved. The first man went down before he even heard Jonas coming a hard strike to the back of the head that dropped him like a slaughtered steer. The second turned startled and caught Jonas's elbow across the jaw. He spun sideways and hit the ground with a grunt. The third man had time to react. He swung the bottle at Jonas's head, but Jonas ducked under it, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted until something cracked. The man screamed and dropped the bottle, which shattered harmlessly in the dirt. "Who sent you?" Jonas's voice was low, dangerous. "Go to hell." Jonas twisted harder. The man's knees buckled. "I asked you a question." Garrett sent us. Said to burn the witch out, make it look like an accident." The front door of the house banged open. Sadie stood on the porch in her nightgown, a shotgun leveled at the chaos in her yard. "What in God's name? Stay back," Jonas called. "I've got this." He looked down at the man writhing in his grip, then at the 2 others groaning on the ground. Amateurs. Hired thugs who had probably never faced anyone who knew how to fight back. "Get up," he told them. "All 3 of you, and start walking back to town. Tell your boss if he wants to burn this place down, he'd better come do it himself." The men scrambled to their feet, the one with the broken wrist cradling it against his chest. They ran down the road toward Ridgeback, tripping over their own boots in their hurry to get away. Sadie lowered the shotgun slowly. Her hands were steady, but her voice was not. "How did you know?" "Heard them coming." Jonas wiped his hands on his trousers. "Light sleeper." "They were going to burn my house." "Yes, ma'am. With me inside it." That was likely the plan. She stood there for a long moment, the shotgun hanging at her side, staring at the road where the men had disappeared. Then she looked at Jonas, really looked at him the way she had not allowed herself to look the day before. "Who are you, Mr. Harden?" "Just a man looking for work." "Men looking for work don't move like that. Don't fight like that." She stepped down from the porch, closing the distance between them. "I've seen ranch hands throw punches. I've seen drunks brawl outside the saloon. That wasn't brawling. That was something else." Jonas met her eyes. He could lie. He had lied 100 times before in 100 different towns to 100 different people who asked questions he did not want to answer. But something about the way Sadie looked at him, not with fear, not with accusation, just with a need to understand, made the lies stick in his throat. "I used to hunt men," he said quietly. "For money. Bounty work mostly. Bringing in wanted criminals, dead or alive." "Used to." I stopped. "Why?" The question hung between them like smoke. Jonas could still see the face of the man in Abilene, the one who had not been a criminal at all, just someone in the wrong place wearing the wrong coat, the one whose wife had screamed when Jonas brought the body back and realized his mistake. "Because I made an error," he said finally, "and a good man died for it. After that, I decided I was done making those kinds of mistakes." Sadie studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded once and turned back toward the house. "Breakfast in 20 minutes, she said over her shoulder. "You earned it." She disappeared inside before he could respond. Jonas stood alone in the yard, the broken bottle glinting in the first light of dawn, and wondered what exactly he had just committed himself to. By noon, word had spread through Ridgeback that Silas Garrett's men had come back from the Prescott place beaten bloody and talking about a demon who had appeared out of the darkness. Emmy heard it first from one of the ranch hands who stopped at the saloon for a midday drink, then from Mrs. Becker, who had heard it from her husband, who had heard it from the blacksmith. By the time Silas himself walked through the saloon doors that afternoon, the whole town knew that something had gone very wrong on the North Road. "Whiskey," Silas said, his voice tight. "And close the damn door. I don't need an audience." Emmy poured the drink and set it in front of him without comment. She had learned long ago that the less she said around Silas Garrett, the safer she stayed. "You hear what happened?" He did not wait for her answer. 3 of my best men put down like dogs by one stranger with a knife. A knife." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Who is he, Emmy? This Harden fellow? Where did he come from? I don't know any more than you do." "Don't lie to me." Silas leaned forward. "He came into this saloon yesterday. You talked to him. What did he say?" Emmy kept her face neutral. "Said he was looking for land, looking for work. Same thing half the drifters who come through here say. And you sent him to the Prescott place." "I mentioned there was a widow who might need help, that's all." Silas's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to make his point. "You're playing a dangerous game, Emmy. That woman is a problem I'm trying to solve. Anyone who helps her becomes part of that problem. Let go of me, Silas. I'm just making sure we understand each other." He released her wrist and picked up his whiskey. "This stranger Harden, he's going to wish he'd kept riding through town. I promise you that." He finished his drink in one swallow and walked out, leaving the door swinging behind him. Emmy rubbed her wrist and stared at the empty glass. Then she reached for a piece of paper and a pencil and started writing a note she would find a way to deliver to the North Road before sundown. Sadie found the note tucked under a rock beside her front gate that evening. She read it twice, her lips pressed into a thin line, then carried it inside where Jonas was finishing the last of the fence repairs he had started that morning. "We've got a problem," she said, handing him the paper. Jonas read it. The handwriting was hurried. The message brief: Garrett knows about Hardin. Planning something. Be careful. E. Emmy Cook, Sadie said. From the saloon. She's the only friend I've got left in that town, and she's risking her neck sending me this. What do you think Garrett's planning? Could be anything. He's tried everything else. Rumors, vandalism, intimidation. Now that his men got sent home with their tails between their legs, he'll be looking to escalate. Jonas folded the note and handed it back. Then we prepare. Prepare how I'm one woman with a shotgun and a garden full of weeds. You're one man with a knife and a past you won't talk about. Garrett's got money influence, and half the town too scared to cross him. Fear works both ways. Jonas met her eyes. Right now, Garrett's afraid of losing control. He's been running this town his way for years, and you're the first person who wouldn't bend. That scares him more than any gunfighter ever could. So what do we do? Wait for him to make his move, and hope we survive it. No. Jonas's voice hardened. We make him understand that coming after you again will cost him more than he's willing to pay. Sadie crossed her arms. And how exactly do you plan to do that? By finding out what he's afraid of losing. 2 days later, Jonas rode into Ridgeback alone. He tied his mare outside the general store and walked in like a man who had every right to be there, even though every eye in the place followed him from the door to the counter. A young clerk stood behind the register looking nervous. Can I help you? Looking for Mr. Garrett. He's in his office, upstairs. But you can't just... Jonas was already walking toward the back stairs. He found Silas in a wood-paneled room that smelled like tobacco and ambition. The man looked up from his desk when Jonas entered, and his face went through several expressions before settling on something that might have been amusement. The famous Mr. Hardin. Silas leaned back in his chair. You've got nerve, I'll give you that. Walking into my place of business after what you did to my men. Your men were about to commit murder and arson. I stopped them. If you've got a problem with that, take it up with the sheriff. The sheriff works for me. Then take it up with whoever the sheriff answers to. Jonas stepped closer to the desk. I'm not here to fight you, Garrett. I'm here to make you an offer. Silas raised an eyebrow. An offer? Walk away from Sadie Prescott. Stop the harassment. Stop the threats. Let her live in peace on her own land. In return, I'll leave town, and you'll never see me again. Silas laughed a genuine laugh full of contempt. You think you're in a position to negotiate? You're a drifter with nothing but a knife and a horse. I own half this county. The land that woman is squatting on is worth more than you'll earn in a lifetime. It's not about the land. Excuse me. Jonas leaned forward, his hands flat on Garrett's desk. I've been asking around, talking to people who remember things. Your warehouse expansion doesn't need that property. There's cheaper land on the South Road that would work just as well. This isn't business. This is personal. Silas's smile flickered. Her husband owed you money, Jonas continued. $200 according to the records at the county office. He died before he could pay it back. And you've been trying to collect from his widow ever since, not through legal means, but through making her life so miserable she'd rather sell than stay. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Jonas straightened up. Here's my counteroffer. Leave Sadie Prescott alone. Forget the debt. Move on with your life. Or I start telling everyone in this town what kind of man really runs their general store. Silas stood slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of consequences. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Neither do you. Jonas turned toward the door. I'll expect your answer by sundown tomorrow. If I don't hear from you, I'll assume you've chosen the hard way. He walked out without looking back, past the nervous clerk, past the watching customers, out into the afternoon heat where his mare waited patiently at the rail. He was halfway down the street when he heard Silas's voice calling from the second-floor window. Harden? You think you're some kind of hero? Ask the widow what happened to the last man who tried to help her. Ask her how her husband really died. Jonas kept walking, but the words lodged in his chest like a splinter. What had happened to Sadie's husband? And why did Silas sound so sure? Jonas would not like the answer. He found Sadie in this garden when he returned, kneeling in the dirt, with her hands buried in soil she was trying to save. She looked up when his shadow fell across her. You went to see him. I did. And he's not going to stop. Jonas dismounted and tied the mare to the fence. He said something before I left. Something about your husband. Sadie's hands went still in the dirt. He said I should ask how your husband really died. She did not answer for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Thomas didn't die in a mining accident. Jonas waited. He died because of me. Sadie pulled her hands from the soil and sat back on her heels. Silas wanted this land 2 years ago. He offered to buy it and Thomas said no, so Silas started spreading rumors about me, the same ones he's spreading now. Witchcraft, ungodly practices. Said I was poisoning the town's water supply with my herbs. That's not... Let me finish. Her voice cracked. Thomas went to confront him. Alone. In the middle of the night because he was too proud to wait for daylight. They argued. Thomas fell or was pushed down the stairs of Garrett's store, broke his neck. Garrett killed him. I can't prove it. Nobody can. Silas said Thomas was drunk, that he tripped. The sheriff ruled it an accident. Sadie's hands were shaking now. But I know the truth. Thomas didn't drink. Not ever. And those stairs are only 5 steps high, not enough to kill a man unless someone helped him fall. Jonas knelt beside her in the dirt. Why didn't you tell me? Because it doesn't matter. She looked at him, and her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. Nothing I say will bring Thomas back. Nothing I do will make Silas pay for what he did. The only thing I can do is refuse to let him win, refuse to give up this land, refuse to run. You're not alone anymore. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't make promises you can't keep. Thomas made promises too. He said he'd protect me. He said we'd grow old on this land together. And now he's in a grave too shallow for a man who deserved better, and I'm still here fighting the same fight he died for. Jonas did not argue. He did not make promises. Instead, he reached out and took one of her dirt-covered hands in his, holding it gently, saying nothing. They stayed that way until the sun began to set, 2 people carrying more weight than their shoulders should have held, sharing the burden without naming it. That night, the church bell rang at midnight. Jonas woke to the sound and knew immediately that something was wrong. Church bells did not ring at midnight unless there was an emergency, a fire, a flood, a death that needed announcing. He was out of the barn and running toward the house before the second toll finished echoing across the valley. Sadie met him on the porch, already dressed, her face pale in the moonlight. It's coming from town. Stay here. Like hell I will. They rode together, pushing the horses hard down the north road, following the sound of the bell until they reached the edge of Ridgeback. A crowd had gathered outside the church. Pastor Whitmore stood on the steps, his face grave, his hands raised for silence. Good people of Ridgeback, he called out. I have terrible news. Young Billy Garrett, Silas's nephew, has fallen gravely ill. The doctor says it's some kind of poisoning. The boy is not expected to live through the night. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jonas felt Sadie stiffen beside him. Where did the boy get sick? Someone called. Pastor Whitmore hesitated. He was seen earlier today near the North Road, near the Prescott property. Every head in the crowd turned toward Sadie. Now I'm not saying, the pastor began. She poisoned him. A woman's voice screamed from somewhere in the crowd. The witch poisoned Silas's boy. That's a lie. Sadie's voice rang out before Jonas could stop her. I never saw that child. I never... She's lying. More voices joined the chorus. She's been brewing poisons for years. We all knew this would happen. The crowd surged forward, and Jonas stepped in front of Sadie, one hand on his knife, his body between her and the mob. Nobody's touching her, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Not until someone proves she actually did something wrong. Get out of the way, stranger. A man Jonas recognized as one of Garrett's workers pushed to the front of the crowd. This ain't your business. It became my business when you started accusing an innocent woman of murder. Innocent. Silas Garrett himself appeared at the edge of the crowd, his face twisted with grief and rage. My nephew is dying, and she, he pointed at Sadie, is the only person in this town who makes potions and brews and God knows what else. Who else could have done this? Anyone who wanted to make her look guilty, Jonas shot back. Including you. The crowd went silent. Silas's face darkened. Are you accusing me of poisoning my own nephew? I'm saying there's more than one way to destroy someone, and you've already tried everything else. For a moment, the entire town held its breath. Jonas's hand rested on his knife. Silas's men were spread through the crowd, their hands near their belts. Then a new voice cut through the tension. The boy ain't poisoned by herbs. Everyone turned. Doc Morrison stood in the doorway of his office across the street, his sleeves rolled up and his face grim. It's bad water, the doctor said. Well, water from the looks of it. The Garrett well on the south property has been contaminated for weeks. Probably a dead animal fell in. Billy's been drinking from it all summer. It finally caught up to him. The silence stretched. Silas's face went through several shades of red. That's impossible. I had that well checked. You had it checked in spring, Doc Morrison said flatly. 3 months ago. A lot can happen in 3 months. Especially to a well nobody watches. The crowd began to shift, the anger draining out of them, as they realized they had been about to attack an innocent woman over their own neglected well. Sadie stepped forward past Jonas, her voice steady despite everything. Where is the boy now? Silas stared at her. What? Where is Billy? I can help. I have herbs that clean out poison slower than what killed him, but they might give his body time to fight back. You stay away from my nephew. Your nephew is dying. Sadie's voice was sharp. And you can hate me all you want, Silas Garrett, but I am the only person in this town who knows how to treat well water sickness. So you can swallow your pride and let me help him, or you can watch him die knowing you had a choice. The words hung in the air. Silas looked at her, and for the first time, Jonas saw fear in his eyes. Then he stepped aside. Sadie worked through the night. She sent Jonas to her cabin for supplies. Dried chamomile-activated charcoal she had made from burnt willow, a tincture of ginger root that helped settle poisoned stomachs. She set up in the Garrett house itself, in the room where Billy lay sweating and moaning, too sick to know who was trying to save him. Silas watched from the doorway, his face unreadable. The boy's mother sat by the bed, holding her son's hand, looking at Sadie with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. What are you giving him? She asked. Charcoal first, to absorb what's left of the poison in his stomach. Then chamomile tea to ease the cramps. Then we wait. Sadie worked as she spoke, her hands steady, despite the hostile eyes watching her every movement. Will he live? I don't know. It depends on how much poison reached his blood. But he's young and strong. That counts for something. The mother nodded and said nothing else. Hours passed. The fever spiked twice, then began to fall. Billy's breathing eased. His color slowly returned from gray to something closer to pink. By dawn, he opened his eyes and asked for water. His mother burst into tears. Sadie cleaned up her supplies and headed for the door, not expecting thanks and not receiving any. But as she passed Silas in the hallway, he grabbed her arm. This doesn't change anything, he said quietly. You understand that? Sadie looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. It changes everything, she said. Because now the whole town knows you would have let your own nephew die rather than admit you were wrong about me." She pulled her arm free and walked out into the morning light where Jonas was waiting with both horses ready. They rode home in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on both of them. But somewhere deep in her chest, Sadie felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Hope. 3 days passed after Billy Garrett opened his eyes, and the silence from town felt heavier than any threat Silas had made before. Sadie knew that silence. It was the kind that came before a storm gathered enough strength to tear down everything in its path. She had felt it 2 years ago in the days before Thomas went to confront Silas. The whole town had gone quiet then too, as if holding its breath for something terrible to happen. She was in the kitchen grinding dried yarrow when Jonas came through the door, his face tight with something she had not seen before. "We need to talk." She set down the mortar and pestle. "What happened?" "Deputy Marshal came through town this morning. Name's Drew Colton. He's been asking questions about me." Sadie's stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that means someone told him I was here." Jonas pulled a folded paper from his coat and set it on the table. "I found this nailed to the fence post an hour ago." She unfolded it. The handwriting was neat official. A wanted poster faded but still legible. Jonas Cole Harden. Wanted for questioning in connection with the death of Samuel Whitfield, Abilene, Texas. Reward $200. "This is you. It's who I used to be." "Questioning," Sadie read aloud. "Not wanted for murder. Just questioning. Doesn't matter. A man with a bounty on his head isn't the kind of help you need right now. If Colton finds me here, he'll use it against you. Say you're harboring a fugitive. Give Garrett exactly what he needs to take everything from you legally. Then we tell him the truth, that you're working for me, that you haven't done anything wrong. The truth doesn't matter when the law's already been bought." Jonas's voice was harder than she had ever heard it. "Garrett's behind this. He couldn't beat you with fire or rumors, so now he's trying a different angle. Get rid of me and you're alone again." Sadie stared at the poster at the face that looked 5 years younger and a lifetime harder than the man standing in front of her. Who was Samuel Whitfield? Jonas closed his eyes. "A farmer. Had a spread outside Abilene. I was tracking a man named Jennings, real killer, 12 bodies to his name. Whitfield was wearing a coat that matched the description I had. I found him on the road after dark. Made a choice too fast. You killed him." "I shot him. He died before I realized my mistake." Jonas's jaw tightened. "His wife was pregnant. I saw her at the funeral. She looked at me like I was the devil himself, and she wasn't wrong." Sadie set the poster down slowly. "That's why you stopped bounty hunting. That's why I stopped everything. Been drifting ever since, trying to find somewhere I couldn't hurt anyone else." He laughed bitterly. "Looks like I found the one place where my past could still cause damage." "Jonas, I should leave." He said it like a man cutting off his own hand. "Tonight, before Colton comes looking. If I'm gone, Garrett loses his leverage and you can—" "No." The word stopped him cold. Sadie stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "You don't get to make that choice for me. I've had enough men deciding what's best for me without asking what I want. Thomas did it. Silas has been doing it for 2 years. I won't let you do it too. This is different." "It's not." Her voice cracked, but she did not look away. "You're the first person in 2 years who looked at me and saw something worth protecting. The first one who stayed when staying was hard. And now you want to ride off because you think your leaving will save me? It might. It won't." She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into the fabric of his sleeve. "Garrett doesn't want you gone. He wants me broken. And if you leave now, that's exactly what he gets. Not because I can't survive alone, I've done that, but because you leaving would prove that everyone who helps me ends up paying a price they can't afford." Jonas stared at her hand on his arm, then at her face. "I'm not a good man, Sadie." Neither was Thomas, but he was my man, and he died trying to do one good thing. Her grip tightened. "Stay. Be the man who doesn't run when it gets hard. That's all I'm asking." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything neither of them could say. Then Jonas covered her hand with his own. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll stay. But when Colton comes, and he will come, we tell him the truth. All of it. Whatever happens after that, we face it together." Sadie nodded, not trusting her voice. Outside, the summer heat pressed down on the land like a fist, and somewhere in the distance, dust rose from the direction of town. Someone was coming. So, Deputy Marshal Drew Colton arrived at Sadie's gate 2 hours later, riding a black gelding that looked too well fed for a lawman's salary. He was younger than Jonas expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a way of sitting in the saddle that said he had been doing this long enough to know when trouble was coming. He did not draw his weapon when he dismounted, but his hand stayed near his belt. "Jonas Harden," he called out. Jonas stepped off the porch, keeping his hands visible. "That's me. I'm Deputy Marshal Drew Colton out of Austin. Got some questions about your whereabouts 3 years back. Mind if we talk? Talk all you want." Colton glanced at Sadie, who had come out to stand beside Jonas. "Ma'am, this might be easier if you went inside." "I own this property," Sadie said evenly. "Any conversation that happens here happens in front of me." Colton studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Suit yourself." He pulled a folded paper from his coat, the same wanted poster Jonas had found earlier. "You know what this is about?" "Samuel Whitfield," Jonas said. "Abilene, 3 years ago." "So you remember?" "I remember everything about that night." Jonas's voice was steady. "I made a mistake. Shot a man I thought was someone else. Turned myself in the next morning, explained what happened. The sheriff let me go because there were witnesses who saw Whitfield reach for his rifle first. Self-defense." Colton's eyebrows rose. "That's not what the poster says." "The poster was issued before the investigation closed. Check with Sheriff Marcus in Abilene, he'll confirm. Case was dropped 6 weeks after Whitfield died. I've got no outstanding charges." "Then why'd you run?" "I didn't run. I left because staying meant looking at that widow every day, knowing what I took from her. That ain't running, that's mercy. For both of us." Colton folded the poster slowly, his expression unreadable. "Interesting story. Mind telling me who sent you this particular document, because I know I didn't post it anywhere between here and Austin. Found it nailed to the fence this morning. No name attached, but I've got a pretty good idea who put it there. Silas Garrett." It was not a question. Jonas nodded. "He's been trying to run Mrs. Prescott off her land for 2 years. I started working here a week ago, and suddenly a deputy marshal shows up with old warrants. That's not coincidence." Colton turned to Sadie. "Ma'am, is what he's saying true about Garrett?" "Every word." Sadie's voice was cold. "He's had his men try to burn my house. He's spread rumors that I'm a witch. He accused me of poisoning his nephew, a boy I then saved because Garrett's own well was contaminated. And now he's trying to get rid of the only person willing to help me by dragging up a case that was closed 3 years ago." "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth. And if you're the kind of lawman who cares about truth, you'll look into it instead of doing Garrett's dirty work for him." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Then Colton did something unexpected. He folded the poster, tucked it back into his coat, and looked at Jonas with something that might have been respect. "I'll wire Sheriff Marcus tonight," he said. "If your story checks out, and I'm betting it will, you've got nothing to worry about from me." He paused. "But I'd watch your back, Harden. Garrett's got reach in this county. If he's as desperate as the lady says a man like you is a loose end, he'll want tied off. I've dealt with desperate men before." "I reckon you have." Colton mounted his horse and touched his hat to Sadie. "Ma'am, sorry for the intrusion." He rode back toward town without looking back. Sadie let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "That could have gone worse." "It could have." Jonas watched the dust trail disappear. But Garrett's not finished. That was his first move. When it fails, he'll try something else. Then we'd better be ready. That night, Emmy Cook appeared at Sadie's door with blood running down her face. Sadie pulled her inside before the woman could collapse, guiding her to a chair while Jonas grabbed clean cloth and water. Emmy's left eye was swelling shut, and her lip had been split badly enough that speaking seemed to hurt. What happened? Sadie knelt in front of her, dabbing carefully at the wounds. Emmy, who did this? Garrett's men. Emmy's voice was thick. They came to the saloon after closing. Said I'd been too friendly with the wrong people. Said I needed a reminder of how things worked in this town. Jonas's hands clenched. How many? 2. Raleigh and that new one, Briggs. Emmy winced as Sadie cleaned the cut on her lip. They would have done worse, but Tom heard the noise and came down with his shotgun. Scared them off before. She did not finish. She did not have to. This is because of me. Sadie's hands were shaking. Because you warned us. Because you... This is because of Garrett. Emmy grabbed Sadie's wrist. Don't you dare blame yourself. I knew the risk when I sent that note. I'd do it again. You need to stay here tonight, Jonas said. Both of you. I'll keep watch. Emmy shook her head. If I don't go back, Tom will think something's really wrong. He's already scared enough. She looked at Sadie. I came to warn you. Garrett's planning something bigger. I don't know what, but I heard him talking to Raleigh before they jumped me. Something about ending this by Sunday. That's 3 days from now. I know. Emmy stood steadying herself against the chair. Whatever he's planning, it's not just about your land anymore. It's about proving he can destroy anyone who crosses him. You, me, anyone who doesn't bend the knee. Sadie helped her to the door. Be careful, Emmy. You too. Emmy looked at Jonas. Take care of her, Hardin. She's the best person in this whole godforsaken town. Then she disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind only bloodstains on Sadie's chair and a warning that felt like a death sentence. Jonas did not sleep that night. He sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, watching the road for any sign of movement. The summer heat had not faded with the sun. It clung to everything, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Around midnight, Sadie came out and sat beside him. You should rest, he said. So should you. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the cicadas and the distant cry of coyotes. Tell me about your husband, Jonas said finally. The real him, not the story the town tells. Sadie was quiet for a long moment. Thomas was a dreamer. He came out here believing he could build something good, a home, a family, a life that wasn't just about survival. He saw this land and saw possibility where everyone else saw dirt and hardship. Sounds like a good man. He was. Her voice softened. But he was also proud. Too proud to ask for help when he needed it. Too proud to walk away from a fight he couldn't win. She looked at Jonas. The night he died, I begged him not to go, told him Garrett wasn't worth it. He said if he didn't stand up now, we'd be running forever. He was right about that. Maybe, but being right didn't save him. Sadie pulled her knees up to her chest. I found him the next morning at the bottom of those stairs. They said he fell, but his hands were bruised, Jonas, like he'd been fighting before he went down. Nobody falls down 5 steps and bruises both fists. Jonas said nothing. There was nothing to say. I stayed because leaving felt like letting Garrett win, like admitting Thomas died for nothing. She turned to look at him. But sometimes I wonder if I'm just too stubborn to know when I'm beaten. You're not beaten. Jonas's voice was firm. You've survived 2 years of hell with nothing but your own 2 hands. That's not stubbornness, that's strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like exhaustion. He reached over and took her hand. She let him. When I shot Whitfield, he said quietly, I told myself I deserved whatever came after. The guilt, the running, the loneliness. I wore it like a penance, thinking if I suffered enough, somehow the scales would balance. Did they? No. Suffering doesn't fix anything. It just makes you tired. He squeezed her hand. But being here helping you, it's the first time in 3 years I've felt like maybe I could do something right. Something that actually matters. Sadie leaned against his shoulder. Then stay. Whatever happens Sunday, whatever Garrett tries, stay. I'm not going anywhere. They sat together until dawn, two broken people finding strength in each other, while somewhere in town, a man with too much power made his final plans. Sunday came with a heat wave that broke records nobody was keeping. By noon, the temperature had climbed high enough that even the dogs stayed under porches too hot to bark at strangers. The town square was nearly empty, most folks hiding indoors or crowded into the saloon, where at least there was shade. Sadie was in her garden, or what remained of it, when she saw the dust rising from the south road. Not one rider, not two. A group of at least 8 moving fast. Jonas. He came out of the barn immediately, rifle in hand. I see them. That's too many for just talking. I know. He checked the rifle, made sure it was loaded, then handed her the shotgun. Whatever happens, don't shoot unless I do. And if things go bad, I'm not running. I wasn't going to say run. He met her eyes. I was going to say aim for Garrett first. Without him, the rest will scatter. The riders reached the gate and stopped. Silas Garrett sat at the front on a chestnut mare, dressed in a black coat, despite the heat, looking like a man attending his own victory parade. Beside him rode Raleigh Briggs, and 5 other men Sadie did not recognize. Behind them, to her shock, was Pastor Whitmore. Mrs. Prescott, Silas's voice carried across the yard. We've come to settle this matter once and for all. There's nothing to settle. This is my land. Now get off it. Silas smiled that cold smile. I'm afraid it's not that simple anymore. You see, I've been doing some research, talking to the right people, and it turns out your husband never actually finished paying off the original claim on this property. Sadie's blood went cold. That's a lie. Is it? Silas reached into his coat and produced a folded document. According to the county records office, Thomas Prescott still owed $18 on his final payment when he died, which means the land technically belongs to the state of Texas or to whoever buys the debt. He smiled wider. I bought the debt yesterday. Jonas stepped forward. That document's a forgery. Is it? Then I'm sure Mrs. Prescott can produce her copy of the completed payment, the original receipt signed by the county clerk. She does have that, doesn't she? Sadie's mind raced. The receipt. Thomas had kept it in the lockbox under the bed along with their marriage certificate and the deed. She had seen it 100 times, but she had not looked for it in months. I'll get it, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Please do. Silas gestured to his men. We'll wait. She went inside, heart pounding, and pulled the lockbox from under the bed. The marriage certificate was there. The deed was there. But where the receipt should have been, there was only empty space. Someone had taken it. She searched frantically under the mattress, behind the dresser, in every drawer and hiding place Thomas had ever used. Nothing. When she came back outside, her face told the story before she could speak. Ah. Silas's voice dripped with false sympathy. How unfortunate. Without proof of completed payment, I'm afraid this land reverts to me as the debt holder. Pastor Whitmore is here as a witness to ensure everything is done properly. The pastor looked uncomfortable but said nothing. This is theft. Jonas's voice was dangerous. You stole that receipt. Careful, Hardin. Accusations like that could land you back in front of a marshal, one who's not quite as understanding as Deputy Colton. You son of a... Jonas. Sadie's voice stopped him. She walked forward until she stood only feet from Silas's horse. You killed my husband. You burned my garden. You beat my only friend bloody. And now you're trying to steal my home with a forged document. Forged, I have the county seal right here. Look at me, Silas. Something in her voice made him pause. You've spent 2 years trying to break me, and I'm still standing. She lifted her chin. You can take this land. You can take everything I own. But you will never take my dignity, and you will never ever make me forget what kind of man you really are. Silas's smile faltered for just a moment, then it hardened into something ugly. Get them off my property, he said to his men. Use whatever force is necessary. Raleigh dismounted first. Briggs followed. The others began spreading out surrounding the house. Jonas raised his rifle. First man who takes another step gets a bullet. You can't kill all of us, Raleigh sneered. Maybe not, but I can definitely kill you first. The standoff held for one terrible moment. Then a new voice cut through the tension. Nobody's killing anybody today. Everyone turned. Deputy Marshal Drew Colton rode up the road badge gleaming in the afternoon sun, followed by 2 other lawmen Sadie did not recognize. What's the meaning of this? Silas demanded. Colton dismounted slowly. Got a wire back from Sheriff Marcus in Abilene last night. Cleared Hardin of any wrongdoing. But that's not why I'm here. He reached into his saddlebag and produced a folded paper. This morning I received an anonymous delivery at my hotel. A receipt, signed by County Clerk Howard Mason, dated 2 years ago. Proves Thomas Prescott paid his debt in full before he died. Sadie's heart stopped. What? Seems someone stole this document from Mrs. Prescott's home and kept it hidden, hoping to use it as leverage later. Colton's eyes fixed on Silas. I wonder who could have done something like that. Silas's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. No, because the handwriting on the back of this receipt, the notes about payment schedules, matches the handwriting on 3 other documents in your general store. Documents I collected this morning as evidence. This is absurd. Furthermore, Colton continued, I've been talking to some folks in town, folks who suddenly felt brave enough to tell the truth once they knew you didn't own every lawman in the county. He paused. Mrs. Emmy Cook gave me a very detailed statement about what your men did to her 3 nights ago, and Doc Morrison confirmed that Thomas Prescott's injuries were consistent with a struggle, not a fall. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Colton stepped forward and took the reins of Silas's horse. Silas Beaumont Garrett, you're under arrest for assault, theft, fraud, and suspicion of murder in the death of Thomas Prescott. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. For one moment, Silas looked like he might fight. His hand moved toward his coat. But 8 armed men surrounded him now, Colton, his deputies, and Jonas with his rifle still raised. The odds had shifted completely. Raleigh and the others backed away slowly, unwilling to die for a man who had already lost. This isn't over, Silas hissed at Sadie as Colton pulled him from his horse. You hear me? This will never be over. Yes, it is. Sadie's voice was quiet, but it carried. It ended the moment you thought you could take everything from me, and I'd just give up. You were wrong, Silas. You were always wrong. They led him away in irons, the most powerful man in Ridgeback, reduced to a criminal in front of the town he had terrorized for years. Pastor Whitmore lingered for a moment, looking at Sadie with something that might have been shame. Mrs. Prescott, I didn't know the extent of— Yes, you did. Her voice was not angry, just tired. You just didn't care enough to find out. He left without another word. And finally, for the first time in 2 years, Sadie's land was truly hers again. That night, Jonas found her sitting on the porch, staring at the receipt Colton had returned to her. Who sent it to him? She asked without looking up. The receipt. Someone took it, someone kept it hidden, and then someone gave it back at exactly the right moment. Who? Jonas sat beside her. I don't know. Could have been anyone who worked for Garrett. Someone who grew a conscience at the last minute. Or someone who was waiting for the right moment to bring him down. That too. She folded the receipt carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's over." "Is it?" Sadie looked at him. "What do you mean? Garrett's arrested, but he's got money lawyers' connections. Men like him don't stay in jail forever. Eventually, he'll be back. Then I'll deal with him then." She reached over and took his hand. "But right now, today, I'm free. For the first time since Thomas died, I can breathe without wondering when the next attack is coming." Jonas looked at their joined hands. "What happens now?" "Now." Sadie smiled a real smile, the first one he had seen from her. "Now we rebuild. The garden, the fences, everything he tried to destroy." She squeezed his fingers. "You still looking for work, Mr. Harden?" "Depends on the boss. I hear she's difficult, stubborn, doesn't know when to quit. Sounds like my kind of woman." Sadie laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was like rain after a long drought. Behind them, the summer sun finally began to set, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson. And somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird sang the first notes of evening, as if even the land itself knew that something had finally, irreversibly changed. The news of Silas Garrett's arrest spread through Ridgeback faster than summer wildfire. By morning, everyone knew. By noon, people who had crossed the street to avoid Sadie for 2 years suddenly found reasons to stop by her gate. Mrs. Decker brought a basket of eggs and an apology so awkward it barely qualified as words. The blacksmith sent his apprentice with an offer to fix her fence posts free of charge. Even Pastor Whitmore's wife appeared with a jar of preserves and a face full of shame she could not quite hide. Sadie accepted their offerings and said little because forgiveness was not something she could hand out like candy at a church fair. These were the same people who had watched her struggle for 2 years and done nothing. The same ones who believed the rumors repeated them, added to them. Now they wanted absolution because the man who started the lies was finally paying for them. She was not ready to give them that. Jonas watched from the barn as the fourth visitor of the day left Sadie's porch, and when he came to stand beside her, she was staring at the basket of eggs like they might bite her. "You don't have to accept their apologies," he said. "I know." "Then why do you look like you're about to break something?" Sadie set the basket down harder than necessary. "Because I needed help 2 years ago. I needed anyone to believe me when I said Garrett killed Thomas. I needed a single person in this town to stand up and say what everyone knew was true." Her voice cracked. "And they didn't. They were too scared or too selfish or too comfortable pretending everything was fine. And now they want me to smile and say it's all forgiven. You don't owe them forgiveness, Sadie." "I know that too." She turned to face him. "But I'm tired of carrying anger. It's heavy. It doesn't change anything. It just makes me into someone I don't want to be." Jonas understood that better than he could say. He had carried his own anger for 3 years at himself, at the circumstances that led to Whitfield's death, at a world that seemed designed to punish good intentions with terrible consequences. "Maybe forgiveness isn't about them," he said slowly. "Maybe it's about putting down a weight you've been carrying too long. Not for their sake, for yours." Sadie looked at him, and something in her eyes shifted. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I just know what it's like to hold on to something that's killing you." She reached out and took his hand. It was becoming a habit, this reaching for each other, and Jonas found he did not want it to stop. "Stay for dinner," she said. "We need to talk about what happens next." "What happens next?" "The garden, the house, everything." She paused. "You." Jonas felt his chest tighten. "What about me?" "You've been sleeping in my barn for 2 weeks. That's not right. You're not hired help anymore, Jonas. You're—" She stopped, searching for the right word. "I'm what?" She looked at him, and the answer was in her eyes before she spoke it. "You're someone I don't want to lose." The words hung between them, fragile and heavy at once. Before Jonas could respond, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. A single rider coming fast up the north road. Emmy Cook. She pulled up hard at the gate, her face flushed with something that looked like panic. "Sadie Jonas, you need to come to town, right now." "What happened?" "It's Garrett." Emmy's voice shook. "He's dead. Someone killed him in his cell last night." The jailhouse was crowded by the time they arrived. Deputy Marshal Colton stood outside the door, blocking entry while two of his men kept the growing crowd at bay. His face was grim, his jaw tight with the kind of frustration that came from having a case fall apart before it could reach trial. "Mrs. Prescott, Hardin." He nodded as they pushed through the crowd. "I was about to send for you." "What happened?" Jonas asked. Colton stepped aside and let them enter. The cell at the back of the jailhouse was still locked, but through the bars they could see Silas Garrett's body slumped against the wall. His face was purple, his eyes bulging a thin line of bruising around his throat. Strangled. "Found him this morning," Colton said. "Guard swears he didn't hear anything. Says he stepped out for 10 minutes around midnight to use the outhouse. When he came back, Garrett was dead." 10 minutes isn't enough time for someone to sneak in, strangle a man, and leave without a trace, Jonas said. "No, it isn't." Colton's voice was flat. "Which means either the guard is lying, or someone knew exactly when to strike." Sadie stared at the body of the man who had tormented her for 2 years. She waited to feel something relief, satisfaction, closure. Instead, there was only a strange emptiness. "Who would want him dead?" she asked. "That's a long list." Colton pulled out a notebook. Garrett had enemies, business rivals, people he cheated, people he threatened. He paused. "And then, there's whoever sent me that receipt." Jonas's head snapped toward him. "You think the same person did both?" "I think it's possible. Someone who wanted to bring Garrett down, but then got impatient when they realized he might wriggle out of the charges. Rich men have a way of finding loopholes. So they killed him instead. Made sure justice was served one way or another." Colton closed his notebook. "I need to ask you both where you were last night." "At my place," Sadie said. "Both of us." "Can anyone verify that?" Jonas stepped forward. "I spent the night in the barn. Didn't leave until this morning." "And Mrs. Prescott?" "Was in the house. I saw a lamp in her window around midnight." Colton nodded slowly. "All right. I don't think either of you did this, but I had to ask." He looked at the body again. "Question is, who did, and why now?" The answer came from an unexpected source. "I did." Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway of the jailhouse, dust-covered and shaking, was a woman Sadie had never seen before. Young, maybe 25, with dark hair and hollow eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "I killed Silas Garrett," the woman said. "And I'd do it again." Her name was Rachel Whitfield, Samuel Whitfield's widow. Jonas felt the floor drop out from under him the moment she said the name. He had not seen her since the funeral in Abilene, but he would never forget her face the way she had looked at him when they brought her husband's body home. "You." She saw him now, recognition flashing in her eyes. "You're Jonas Hardin." "Rachel, don't." She held up a hand. "I didn't come here for you. I came because Silas Garrett deserved to die and I was the one who owed it to him." Colton stepped forward. "Ma'am, you're confessing to murder. You understand what that means." "I understand." Rachel's voice was steady, despite the trembling in her hands. "I've been tracking Garrett for 2 years, ever since I found out the truth about my husband's death." The room went silent. "Samuel wasn't killed by accident," she continued. "He was murdered by Silas Garrett's hired men, the same men who paid Mr. Hardin to track him, gave him bad information, made sure he'd find Samuel instead of the real criminal." Jonas felt like he had been punched in the chest. "What?" "Garrett had business dealings with a man named Jennings, the one you were actually hunting. When Jennings couldn't pay his debts, Garrett decided to have him killed. But Jennings was smart. He paid Samuel to wear his coat, ride his horse, take his usual route home. Made himself a target while Jennings escaped. That's not possible. Jonas's voice was hoarse. I checked. I verified. You verified what Garrett's people wanted you to verify. False witnesses. Planted evidence. They used you, Mr. Harden. Just like they used my husband. The weight of it crashed over Jonas like a collapsing building. For 3 years he had carried the guilt of killing an innocent man through his own carelessness. But it had never been carelessness at all. It had been murder, and he had been the weapon. I found the letters 6 months ago, Rachel continued. Hidden in Jennings's things after he died of fever in a mining camp. He wrote everything down. Names, dates, how Garrett set the whole thing up. She looked at Colton. I've got the letters with me. They prove everything. Why didn't you take them to the law? Colton asked. Because the law works slow, and I've been watching Garrett buy his way out of trouble for years. I knew if I handed over the evidence, he'd find a way to destroy it before it could be used. Her voice hardened. So I waited. I followed him here. I watched him try to destroy another innocent person. And when I saw my chance, I took it. Sadie stepped forward. You sent the receipt to Deputy Colton. Rachel nodded. I found it in Garrett's office 6 months ago when I was searching for the letters. Stole it, kept it hidden, waited for the right moment to use it. You could have sent it sooner, saved me months of... I could have, but I needed Garrett to feel safe first. Needed him to think he had already won. That way, when everything fell apart, the fall would be that much harder. Rachel's eyes were cold. He deserved to suffer. Just like my husband suffered. Just like you suffered, Mrs. Prescott. The room fell silent again. Then Jonas spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel, I am so sorry. For what happened to Samuel. For my part in it. I thought I know what you thought. Rachel looked at him, and for the first time the anger in her face softened slightly. I blamed you for 3 years. Hated you every day. But when I found those letters... She shook her head. You were as much a victim as Samuel was. Garrett used you to do his dirty work, then let you carry the guilt while he walked free. That doesn't change what I did. No, it doesn't. She held his gaze. But it changes why you did it, and that matters. Colton cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm going to need to take you into custody, but given what you've told me, and assuming those letters back up your story, I'll make sure the judge knows the full circumstances. I'm not asking for mercy, Rachel said. I killed a man. I'll face whatever comes. You killed a murderer, Sadie said quietly. A man who destroyed lives for profit. I don't know what the law says about that, but I know what justice looks like, and this might be as close as any of us ever get. Rachel looked at her, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. 2 women who had lost husbands to the same monster. 2 women who had survived. Take care of him, Rachel said, nodding toward Jonas. He's a good man, better than he knows. Then she held out her wrists for Colton to bind and walked out of the jailhouse with her head held high. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Jonas did not speak because he could not find words for what he was feeling. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of believing he had destroyed an innocent life through his own failure, and now he learned it had been orchestrated from the beginning. He had not killed Samuel Whitfield through carelessness. He had been used as a murder weapon by a man who was now dead. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing on ground that had suddenly shifted, leaving him unsure which direction was up. Sadie did not push him to talk. She rode beside him in silence, her presence steady and warm, asking nothing but offering everything. When they reached the house, she dismounted first and turned to face him. You need time, she said. I understand that. Sadie, no, listen. She stepped closer. What you learned today changes things. It doesn't change who you are, but it changes how you see yourself. You need time to sort through that. I won't rush you." Jonas looked at her, this woman who had lost everything and rebuilt herself from the ground up. This woman who had every reason to hate the world, but chose to keep fighting instead. "I don't need time," he said. "Jonas, I've spent 3 years running from what I thought I did, hiding from the guilt, convincing myself I didn't deserve anything good because of the mistake I made." He stepped down from his horse and stood in front of her. "I'm done running." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want to stay. Here. With you. Not because I'm working off some debt, and not because I don't have anywhere else to go." He took her hands in his. "Because you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you, I feel like the man I used to be, the one who believed he could make a difference." Sadie's eyes were bright. "Jonas, you've only known me 2 weeks. I've known you long enough to know that life is too short to wait for certainty." He squeezed her hands. "I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking for a chance to see what this could be." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached up, took his face in her hands, and kissed him. It was not a long kiss or a dramatic one, just a simple pressing of lips that said more than words ever could. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "Stay," she said. "Stay as long as you want. I plan to." That night, for the first time in 3 years, Jonas slept without nightmares. He dreamed of green fields and summer rain, of a woman's hand in his, of a future that felt possible instead of forbidden. When he woke, the sun was already up, and the smell of coffee drifted from the house. He found Sadie in the kitchen, moving with the easy rhythm of someone who had made breakfast 1,000 times. She looked up when he entered, and the smile that crossed her face was worth more than any reward he had ever collected. "Morning," she said. "Morning. Coffee's ready. Eggs in 5 minutes." He sat at the table and watched her work, feeling something he had not felt in longer than he could remember. Home. This was what it felt like to have a home. "Emmy's coming by later," Sadie said as she set a plate in front of him. "She wants to talk about reopening the market stall. Says now that Garrett's gone, people are actually interested in buying my medicines again." "That's good." "It is." She sat across from him. "It's strange, though. 2 weeks ago I was fighting just to survive. Now I'm thinking about the future, planning things. It doesn't feel real." "Give it time. It'll feel real." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you, Jonas, for everything." "You don't have to thank me." "I know, but I want to." She squeezed his fingers. "You saved my life, more than once, and not just from Garrett's men. You reminded me that I was worth saving. That's not nothing." Jonas looked at their joined hands, and for the first time in 3 years, he did not see blood on his fingers. He saw hope. 3 weeks after Silas Garrett's death, the summer heat finally broke. Rain came in the night, soft at first, then harder, soaking into the parched Texas soil, like a blessing no one had dared to pray for. By morning, the air smelled different, cleaner, cooler, full of the promise that dry seasons always hid until they ended. Sadie stood on her porch, watching the last of the clouds drift east, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold because she kept forgetting to drink it. Behind her, Jonas was finishing repairs on the kitchen window that had been cracked since before Thomas died. Everything was changing. Slowly but unmistakably. The market stall had reopened a week ago, and this time people came, not just to buy, but to apologize, to ask questions about her herbs, to treat her like a neighbor instead of a pariah. Mrs. Decker had become something close to friendly. The blacksmith's wife ordered a custom batch of salve for her husband's hands. Even Pastor Whitmore had delivered a sermon about the dangers of bearing false witness, though he never mentioned Garrett by name. Forgiveness. Sadie was learning did not come all at once. It came in small pieces like rain after drought, each drop insignificant on its own, but together enough to change the landscape. "You're thinking too hard again." She turned. Jonas stood in the doorway, sawdust in his hair, and a smile on his face that still surprised her every time she saw it. "Just watching the rain?" "It's not raining anymore." "I know." She held out her hand and he took it. "I was thinking about Rachel." Jonas's smile faded slightly. Rachel Whitfield's trial had concluded 2 days ago. The judge, after reviewing Jennings's letters and hearing testimony from a dozen witnesses about Garrett's crimes, had ruled the killing justifiable homicide. Rachel walked free, though the hollow look in her eyes suggested freedom came with its own price. "She's leaving tomorrow," Jonas said, "heading back east. Said she wants to start over somewhere nobody knows her name." "Can she do that? Just start over?" "I don't know." He squeezed her hand. "But she deserves the chance to try." Sadie leaned against his shoulder. "Do you think we could do that? Start over? We already are." She looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean this." He gestured at the house, the garden, the land stretching out around them. "2 months ago you were fighting just to keep this place. I was drifting from town to town trying to outrun something I couldn't name. Now look at us." "What do you see?" "Home." His voice was quiet but certain. "I see home." Sadie felt tears prick her eyes. She had not cried in 2 years, not since Thomas's funeral, but these were different tears. Not grief, something closer to joy. "Jonas." A horse's whinny interrupted her. They both turned to see a rider approaching on the north road, moving at an easy pace that suggested no emergency. Deputy Marshal Drew Colton. He dismounted at the gate and walked up the path, his badge catching the morning light. His face was unreadable, the way it always was when he had news that could go either way. "Morning, folks." "Deputy." Jonas stepped forward. "Something wrong?" "Not exactly." Colton pulled an envelope from his coat. "Got a letter for you, Hardin. Came through the Austin office yesterday. Official seal." Jonas took the envelope, his jaw tight. Official seals usually meant trouble warrants, summons, demands from a system that never forgot old debts. He opened it slowly and read. Sadie watched his face change. First confusion, then disbelief, then something she could not name. "What is it?" she asked. Jonas handed her the letter without speaking. She read it twice before the words made sense. The state of Texas, in recognition of Jonas Cole Hardin's assistance in exposing the criminal enterprise operated by Silas Beaumont Garrett, hereby grants full pardon for any and all outstanding warrants or accusations related to the Abilene incident of 1875. Furthermore, Mr. Hardin is awarded a sum of $500 as compensation for wrongful pursuit under false pretenses orchestrated by the deceased. "They pardoned you," Sadie breathed. "Jonas, they cleared your name." "Not just cleared it." Colton's voice held a rare note of warmth. "They acknowledged you were set up, that Garrett used false information to make you a weapon in his scheme. It's official now, you're not a killer, Hardin. You never were." Jonas stood very still. 3 years of guilt, 3 years of running, 3 years of believing he had destroyed an innocent life through his own failure. And now, in the space of a single letter, all of it was gone. "I don't know what to say," he managed. "You don't have to say anything." Colton extended his hand. "Just thought you should know you're free. Really free. No more looking over your shoulder. No more waiting for the past to catch up." Jonas shook his hand, and Sadie saw the tears he was trying to hide. When Colton left, she wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." "Not over." His voice was thick. "Just beginning." That afternoon, Emmy Cook arrived with news of her own. She burst through Sadie's gate like a woman on fire, her face flushed with something that looked like terror and excitement combined. "Sadie, you need to hear this. What happened? Is someone hurt?" "No one's hurt." Emmy grabbed her arm. "It's the town council. They held a meeting this morning. Secret didn't tell anyone until it was done. They voted. Voted on what? On you. Emmy's eyes were bright. They voted to name you the official town healer. Paid position. They want you to set up a proper clinic right in the center of Ridgeback. Said it's time the town had someone who actually knew what they were doing instead of sending people all the way to Austin for help. Sadie stared at her. That's impossible. These are the same people who called me a witch 6 weeks ago. People change. Or at least they pretend to when the man who was telling them what to think gets strangled in his own jail cell. Emmy's voice softened. I know it doesn't erase what they did, but it's something. It's a start. Jonas appeared in the doorway. What's going on? They want to make me town healer, Sadie said, still not quite believing it. Official position. Salary. A clinic. Are you going to take it? Sadie looked at him, then at Emmy, then at the garden she had rebuilt from nothing. I don't know, she said honestly. A month ago, I would have said no. Would have told them to take their offer and choke on it. But now, Jonas prompted. Now I'm tired of fighting. Tired of proving myself to people who should have believed me from the start. She took a deep breath. But I'm also tired of being alone. And if taking this position means I can actually help people, really help them, without having to hide what I do, maybe it's worth swallowing my pride. Emmy squeezed her arm. You don't have to decide today. They gave you a week to think about it. A week? Sadie laughed softly. That's more consideration than they ever gave me before. After Emmy left, Jonas found Sadie sitting on the porch again, staring at the road that led to town. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking about Thomas. Her voice was quiet. He dreamed of building something here. A home. A community. A place where people took care of each other. She paused. He died before any of that could happen. But maybe I can finish what he started. By becoming town healer. By being part of something bigger than just survival. She looked at him. For 2 years, I've been fighting to hold on to this land. Fighting to prove I had a right to exist. But that's not living. That's just enduring. And now I want to live. Really live. Build something that matters. Help people who need it. She took his hand. And I want to do it with you. Jonas felt his heart crack open in a way it had not done in years. Sadie. I'm not asking you to stay forever. I know you've got your own demons to wrestle, your own path to walk. But if you wanted to walk it here with me... She stopped suddenly, uncertain. Is that too much to ask? It's not enough. She blinked. What? Staying here. Helping you build something. That's not enough. He turned to face her fully. I want more than that. I want to marry you. The words hung in the air between them. Jonas, we've known each other 2 months. I've known you long enough. His voice was steady. I've seen you face down a mob. Seen you save a boy who belonged to the man trying to destroy you. Seen you forgive people who didn't deserve it because carrying anger was heavier than letting go. He took both her hands. I've spent 3 years running from who I was. You're the first person who made me want to run towards something instead. Sadie's eyes were wet. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. But you're pardon the money, you could go anywhere. Do anything. Why would you choose to stay here in this town that treated us both like dirt? Because this is where you are. He touched her face gently. And wherever you are is where I want to be. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, a bright, surprised sound that startled them both. You're crazy. Probably. We barely know each other. We know enough. The town will talk. Let them. She looked at him, and all the walls she had built, the ones that kept her safe, kept her distant, kept her from ever being heard again, began to crumble. Yes, she said. Yes. Yes? I'll marry you. She was crying now, but smiling too. God help us both, but yes. Jonas pulled her into his arms and held her tight, feeling the last of his old wounds finally begin to heal. Paid. The wedding took place 3 weeks later on the first day of autumn. It was a small ceremony, just Emmy and her husband Tom, Deputy Colton, and a handful of townspeople who had proven themselves trustworthy over the preceding months. Pastor Whitmore officiated, his voice humble in a way it had not been before Garrett's fall. Sadie wore a simple dress she had made herself with herbs from her garden woven into the hem for luck. Jonas wore his cleanest shirt and the knife at his belt that had saved both their lives more than once. When the pastor asked if anyone objected, the silence was profound, and when Jonas kissed his bride, the small crowd cheered with genuine warmth. The reception was held at Emmy's saloon, the same place where Jonas had first asked about a widow on the North Road. Tom served drinks on the house, and someone brought a fiddle, and before long the whole place was full of music and laughter. Sadie danced with Jonas, then with Tom, then with Colton, who turned out to be surprisingly light on his feet for a lawman. "Happy?" Jonas asked when she finally returned to his side. "More than I thought possible." She leaned against him. "Is this real? Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's real." He kissed her forehead. "As real as anything gets." Near midnight, when the party began to wind down, they walked home together under a sky full of stars. The house looked different in the moonlight, not smaller or meaner, but full of possibility. The garden was recovering. The fences stood straight. The barn where Jonas had spent his first week sleeping was now full of proper supplies instead of makeshift bedding. Everything had changed. "What do we do now?" Sadie asked as they stood on the porch. "Now," Jonas smiled. "Now we live, we build, we help people who need it and ignore the ones who don't deserve our attention. That simple. Nothing simple, but it doesn't have to be complicated either." He took her hand. "We take it one day at a time, one problem at a time. And whenever things get hard, we remember what we survived to get here." Sadie looked at the land around them. The land Thomas had dreamed of building into something good. The land she had fought to keep when everyone told her to give up. The land that was now hers and Jonas's together. "Thomas would have liked you," she said softly. "You think so? I know so. He always said he could tell a good man by how he acted when no one was watching. You've been that man since the day you arrived." Jonas thought about the person he had been 3 years ago, the bounty hunter who shot first and asked questions later. The man who had carried guilt like a second skin. The drifter who believed he deserved nothing good because of mistakes he could not undo. That man was gone now. Not forgotten, but transformed. Built into something new by a woman who refused to give up even when the whole world told her to. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." Sadie squeezed his hand. "Now come inside. We've got a life to start building." They walked through the door together, and behind them, the night was quiet and full of peace. 1 year later, the clinic in Ridgeback treated its 100th patient. Sadie had become more than the town healer. She was the heart of the community, the person everyone turned to when things went wrong. Her herbs grew in a garden 3 times the size of the original, tended by 2 young women she had taken on as apprentices. Jonas ran the ranch with steady hands and a clear conscience. He still wore the knife at his belt, but he had not needed to use it since the night he stopped Garrett's men from burning down their home. The pardon money had gone toward improvements, a new barn, better fencing, a well that actually worked. And in the spring, their daughter was born. They named her Hope. Not because it was a pretty name, though it was, but because she represented everything they had fought for. Everything they had survived. Everything they had built from the ashes of their separate tragedies. Sadie held her daughter in the same room where she had once knelt, grinding yarrow alone, wondering if she would live to see another season. Jonas stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, looking at the tiny face with eyes that held no shadows anymore. "She's perfect," he said. "She's ours." Sadie smiled up at him. "That's what matters." Outside, the summer sun was just beginning to warm the Texas hills. The garden was in full bloom. The town was at peace. And the woman who had once been called a witch was now the most beloved person in Ridgeback. It had taken fire and flood, lies and truth, death and survival. But in the end, love had won. Not the fairy tale kind that arrives without effort and solves everything with a kiss. The real kind, the kind that grows from shared struggle, mutual respect, and the choice to stay when staying is hard. Sadie looked at her daughter, then at her husband, then at the land that had nearly destroyed her, but had instead become her sanctuary. "Thank you," she whispered. Jonas understood she was not talking to him. She was talking to Thomas, to the past that had shaped her, to the grief that had almost swallowed her whole. "He's watching," Jonas said quietly, "and he's proud." Sadie nodded, tears streaming down her face, and held her daughter closer. Some stories end in tragedy. Some end in triumph. But the best ones, the truest ones, end in something harder to define. They end in peace. The kind of peace that comes not from avoiding hardship, but from walking through it and coming out the other side. The kind that cannot be taken away because it was earned, not given. Sadie Ruth Prescott Hardin had earned her peace, and she would spend the rest of her life protecting it, building on it, and passing it down to the daughter who carried all their hopes in her tiny, perfect hands. The town that had once rejected her now could not imagine life without her. The man who had once believed himself unworthy of love now woke every morning beside the woman who had proven him wrong. And the land that had demanded so much sacrifice was finally giving back season after season, year after year. This was their story. Not perfect, not easy, but true. And in the end, truth was all that mattered. Because the worth of a person is not decided by family or society or circumstance. It is decided by what they choose to build when everything else has been taken away. Sadie chose love. She chose hope. She chose to keep fighting when surrender would have been easier. And because of that choice, she found something most people spend their whole lives searching for. She found home.